Thank you, Catherine. It's a real pleasure to be here. I wanted to talk about 7 top tips that I learned doing my role in Agile project management. So what I'm going to do is thread this into a narrative, a story about what I've done. It's a story of failure. It's a story of personal failure. It's quite embarrassing in parts for me, hopefully not for you to listen to. And then I'll go through some of the experiences I've had learning from my own failure and developing things further. And it's going to be based on the work that I've done with BBC Worldwide that I finished a couple of years ago. I'm now working with a large government client in the UK. Unfortunately, I'm not allowed to talk about that work publicly. But let's go back and start with my story. And I want to start with my first tip, the importance of understanding the purpose of what you were doing. So Catherine mentioned that I've been doing this for about 10 years. This is my very first Scrum team, and this was at an investment bank in London. And I'd never done Scrum before, and I was really looking for an opportunity. I'd been a software developer, but I wanted to have more influence. Actually, I wanted to pair program, and so I went to this organization because they were doing Agile back in the day. And then when I got there, everyone that was doing pair programming had left. And so then I thought, well, I'll go and create a team where you can do things like pair programming, extreme programming. The trouble was that someone had told me that the senior leader hated Agile. So I was faced with this dilemma. I got an opportunity to run a team. I wanted to use these methods that I believed would be effective, but I was told that the leader hated it. And so to resolve my dilemma, I chose quite a curious technique. This is a fire escape. This is a stand-up that we used to do at 10 to 4 every day. So I thought, rather than talking to the leader about why I wanted to do it and see if I could work together with him, I'd just use a very sort of controlling, passive style and do it anyway, but hope that no one noticed. So this was our stand-up. Every day at 10 to 4, 15 people would leave a floor and stand in this fire escape doing the stand-up. So I guess when I look back at that now, I think I had good intentions. The methods were good. The methods did produce results. But I would have preferred to do what I do now, which is to talk to people. If someone didn't like it, test that assumption. Because actually, the joke on this was when I finally left here, I said to the leader said, "Why are you leaving? You know, I thought what you did was excellent." I said, "Really?" Because I'd heard that you hated it. And he said, "No. I mean, I think I'm so impressed with the stand-up because it makes me think, what are all the people on my floor doing? Just sitting there all day. They don't speak to each other. I wonder how they understand what's going on." So he was actually probably quite a proponent of it, but because of my own fears about talking about something where I didn't think I'd get my way, I missed that opportunity for the discussion, and I missed the opportunity for learning, and I created limited learning between us, which was quite sad, I think. Although the methods were good, and the story is often funny. So what I was doing was really focused on Kanban. So this first point is about starting with purpose. And I really got focused on method and not on purpose. And we had a great time, and I learned a lot of good things. This was our board originally. We did wacky things like following the principles of self-organization. Everybody could choose what they did. So the board is organized around people. You can see these. I'm not going to point, it's too high. The board is organized to swim lanes with people. But one thing this taught me, actually, is the value of visualizing things and showing it to other people. And also, actually, a key thing for me is asking others for help in our own learning, because we're limited by what we can see ourselves. I took this photo to a group called the Extreme Tuesday Club in London, and immediately they were very critical, because you can see things that I knew but didn't really take in. Like one guy here, the guy third from the top, has something in every column. And I asked him about it the next day. I said, "You're doing something in every column. What's that about?" And he said, "I wanted to look busy." And so it was an important lesson that you get what you measure. I didn't realize this, but in the interest of allowing people to make choices themselves, we'd organize the work around people, and people often act defensively, and they want to make sure that they look good by whatever you're measuring, even if you didn't intend it. So this is by focusing on people, we made someone focus on their own effort rather than the team's work. And you can also see what I love about this is all of the work is waiting in testing. And this was using Scrum. This was a day before the end of the sprint. So it was a really exciting time because nobody knew what would finish at the end of a sprint. We'd literally throw it all over the wall. We've done our bit and hope that the tester could get through it before it went to production. So happily, by making things visible and talking about them, we were able to iterate. We did things like pin people to the work. You can see a more steady flow of work across the board. Particularly, we only started what we could finish, that Kanban idea. We iterated again and continued doing the same thing, visualized other flows, exit rules, and this got really good. But again, we did this for a long time, and I even did crazy things like every day I'd count all the post-its on the board because I really believed that Kanban was the one true way, and great things would happen if I just did Kanban properly. And I counted how many tickets were in each column, and I did this cumulative flow diagram that showed that we got a lot of tickets done, and sometimes there were bottlenecks, but mostly it just sort of flowed. But the thing was, and you can probably hear from my voice, it became a bit depressing after a while. It really depressing because I couldn't really relate what we were doing to the purpose anymore. And I guess one thing was I was focused on the method. So I like this phrase, stop boring managers to death by talking about your method. Okay? Managers or people outside your team don't care about your method. They care about you helping them solve their problems. And so rather than focusing on method, I think this is a much more productive thing, which is to understand what problem you're trying to solve. And that starts you moving towards why you're doing the work. What's the purpose behind it? So this is a model that I got from a group called Vanguard Consulting, and I really like this as a conceptual model, that what we should start by doing is understanding why we're doing the work. What's the purpose? And then once we understand the purpose, the next thing is to ask, what measures could we use that are helping us know whether we are achieving our purpose or not? And that's a very different thing than using measures that tell us whether we're busy. I seem to constantly fight the psychic weeds of, shall we just count story points and compare teams? It happens all the time. But my question with that is, if we did more points, would we be achieving more of our purpose? The answer is probably not. And then the other thing is that the method should be used to create an impact on the measures which deliver the purpose. So the key thing here is I was focused very much just on the method, and I was looking at measures like timeliness, which is a thing, but is a different thing than delivering purpose, particularly in what I do, which is help software development teams build public-facing websites, where the purpose is usually to achieve some user need, help them buy a thing, help them understand the price of a thing, help them submit an application or get the money that they need for a certain purpose. So one thing is, if you can't find the purpose in general, I really like Peter Drucker, who was a management thinker in America in the 50s, where he says the de facto purpose of a business is to create and keep a customer. And that's what I shifted on, and I'll use this purpose when I talk about the work I did with BBC Worldwide. But so I tried to go back to the thing I was doing in the investment bank and focus a little bit more on purpose. So rather than counting the number of cards finished and what column they were blocked in, I decided to look at the financial trading products that we were building and understand how long they took through a life cycle from development through to in production. And then an idea I was working with was that things are valuable when they're used. It's not always true. Sometimes it's useful to have something that could be used, but wait until things were used. And what I like about this was it was visualizing that we got 27 products done fairly quickly, but some of them, which I chose to highlight in red, were never used. And what I like is that at the time I was saying that you should use empirical data to make decisions and just use the data. The numbers will tell you things. But when I look at it, I think I spent hours choosing that color of red to show them how poor they were at what I thought. They were creating products that no one needed and putting us under pressure as a development team to produce them. And it didn't make sense. What was the purpose? But what was quite interesting when I went back was understanding what I did with this information. So I basically presented this at a steering group meeting with the senior teams, and the thing was, my view was that these guys were idiots, or they'd made idiotic, nonsensical, hard to understand decisions. I could see the truth. The truth was that they were idiots, and I genuinely wanted to improve things. I wanted them to ask us to do products that were going to be necessary because we'd got a team that was able to deliver things fast. But what I said was, here's a graph that I think is interesting. I was wondering if we could talk about it. And the senior leader said, I think this shows that we're making very bad decisions. And I felt so bad about potentially being critical of him in front of other people that I just laughed and we never spoke about it again. And so it helped me understand that just because you produce the data, that's not enough. You need to do better than that. And it started me on this journey of trying to understand why I wasn't getting the benefits that I was hoping for. And it clued me in, one thing in particular clued me in. After I resigned this job, someone asked me at a steering group meeting, how long was product 28 going to take? And a friend of mine was in the same meeting, and afterwards he said to me, Benjamin, when they asked you that question, how many seconds was it before you bit the guy's head off? And I had two reactions. I went, wow. Firstly, I didn't think I was trying to bite the guy's head off, but now that you mention it, I think I in fact did, because I went bananas at him. I'm like, you're not even using the ones you built. How can you possibly ask me about that? And then I thought, I didn't realize I'd bit his head off until my friend asked me about that. And I don't think biting someone's head off is an effective way of working together with others, the wrangling cats. So I felt very ashamed, in fact, to learn this about myself, and quite embarrassed. And I thought I'd really failed, that I'd done all these things right in terms of following the methods of Kanban. I tried to go up a level and talk about the purpose, but I really hadn't produced a very effective conversation. In fact, I'd done the opposite. I'd said I'd kept things secret, I hadn't talked or done anything like that. So I think a key thing for me is to look at how your own behavior creates culture. And I wanted to give some examples. After I did that work, I did some coaching, agile coaching work with another team, and I asked if I could record myself with my iPhone so that I could listen back, like the call centers. I'm recording this session for training purposes, and they were fine with it. And I thought this session hadn't gone very well, and so I went back to my hotel that night. I thought, well, this is good material for learning. Something didn't work the way I wanted. I was heart was pumping, was a bit concerned. And I thought, brilliant, I've got the source material in this audio recording to find out what went wrong. So I pop the headphones in, I'm listening to the meeting, and then, I still get goosebumps when I talk about this. There was a bit where I realized 20 seconds before a certain section of the tape what I'd in fact said. So this was amazing that we're having a discussion about whether they should have a review step after the QA step before it went into production. And I didn't like the way the guy was speaking, so I said to him, no, don't say it like that. So basically I told someone to stop speaking, criticized their form of speaking, and basically yelled at him. And what amazed me about this was that I did that, and I remembered doing it, but not until 10 seconds before I heard the audio. I was so embarrassed because I wouldn't stand up here and say, you know what, good agile coaching, if someone says something you don't like, first thing is yell at them. Yep, negate them and use force. That is top quality coaching. So I didn't believe that at all, and yet I'd produced it, and even better than that, I'd produced it, forgotten I'd produced it, even though I'd recorded it for my own learning, and then only realized it when I listened back to it. And I think this gave me an enormous humility about how can I be effective if I act like this under conditions of stress and don't realize it. And one of the things it brought out was my own internal theory that I thought in both cases, when I bit the guy's head off and when I yelled at someone, that I would have understood that I was being wrong, because I thought both those things weren't effective. They weren't effective by my own theory. But it highlighted that I had a belief that I'd know when I was being wrong. And I really like this question by Catherine Schultz. It says, what does being wrong feel like? When you're wrong, when you're being wrong, what does it feel like? And her answer is being wrong. So it's like this Willy E. Coyote. Willy E. Coyote has been wrong since that point, right? He's left the edge of the cliff, and so he was being wrong. But it's only at this point here, when he looks at the camera, that he realizes he has been wrong. So this is the thing, that often we have this theory that if we're performing ineffectively, we'll know it. But actually, it's often not the case. You don't know that you're ineffective until after you've been ineffective. And what I really like about this, although it is enormously emotionally hard work for me. I find it's taken a lot of work to sort of accept that I can be as ineffective as audio tapes prove me to be, but it has provided enormous leverage. So being able to understand how I've been ineffective and in what situations, and then accept that I can act like that, has been really helpful. Catherine was talking before about some sort of Buddhist ideas, and I think one of the really interesting things is to do work on yourself where you think about how you've acted and how you could improve often involves challenging our own sense of ego and competence. And people talk about this idea that you've got to let the ego die, that you've got to sort of say, yeah, I did act that poorly. I really did. It came out of my mouth. No other defense. That's exactly what happened. But the key thing is the leverage that gives you. So this phrase here, if you're not part of the problem, you can't be part of the solution. If you understand how your own behavior and beliefs are creating the culture, that is an awesome, awesome ability that you've got then to make a difference to the culture. But as I say, it does mean pushing through, at least for me, feelings of embarrassment, sadness, anger at myself and my own ineffectiveness in order to get better. But it is possible. So it got me really interested in this idea that how we think we act and how we tell others we act isn't the same as how we actually act. That's what the tape recorder proved to me and my friend proved to me. And for fun, I used to run some workshops. Because I felt so lonely, I thought it can't just be me. Maybe I could show others that they're useless as well. It wasn't quite as bad as that, but I did try and make myself feel better by showing that others could feel the same way. So I ran workshops at Agile conferences where I asked people to do an exercise where they gave feedback to someone who'd been performing poorly. And I gave them a scenario and said, pretend I'm that person who's performed badly and see if you can help me. I've come to you for help. What would you say to me? And the scenario was the person who performed badly was giving feedback to someone on their team. So a member of the workshop said, well, your feedback to that team member was poor because it didn't focus on any positive actions and it didn't use any examples. I said, I think this is really interesting. If it's okay with you, I'd like to explore some of the things I see here and just check them with you. Is that okay? Yep, that's fine. So I said, I think what you've told me here tells me what you think good feedback is. You've got a theory of good feedback. For you, good feedback uses examples, and good feedback focuses on things that are done positively. Is that right? Do you think that's good feedback? He said, yep. I said, well, that's really interesting, because let's test your own statement against your own belief in what good feedback is. So you've got two rules for good feedback. It should use an example. So in your statement, was there any example? I don't see it. What do you think? He's like, I don't see any example in that statement either. I said, well, you've got a second rule. It should focus on something that was done well. It should be positive. So have you referred to anything that's positive here? And I said, I don't. My view was that he hadn't, and he agreed. And so I said, that's amazing. So you've got a theory of what effective feedback is, and yet you've produced a statement that is the complete opposite of what you believe to be effective. Did you do that deliberately? And he's like, no. It just came out. And so I'm using this as evidence that it wasn't just me that made these sort of mistakes, yell at people when you find them difficult or bite someone's head off instead of talking to them. But it's a common human thing that you can reproduce. And I used to go to conferences and find examples. It felt a little bit defensive, but it was fun. I do like the humor. To me, I'm more accepting that we humans are messed up, irrational creatures at times. So we're all like that. We can all be like that. This was a group of coaches that wanted to understand whether they were helping Agile teams be effective. And some of the things they were trying to help teams get more effective at was transparency. And so they wanted to know, are we, as coaches, helping teams become more effective? Which is a good thing, valuable thing. But where I thought things went wrong was the method they used to measure this. What they decided to do was to stand at the stand-ups for the teams they were coaching and on a clipboard, in secret, score the team for how transparent they were, and then take the transparency scores back to coaching head office in secret. And so I'm like, this is brilliant. On the one hand, transparency is seen as an important, useful thing, and yet in their own measurement of it, they were doing it in secret, which seemed contradictory to me. So I think, as I say, how people act and how they believe they act is often very different to how they actually act. If you can understand how you're actually acting, you've got far more leverage and opportunity to change. And so this happens all the time in Actually, the other thing I wanted to bring up is that you need to be able to talk about things when they don't work effectively, because a lot of the theory around Kanban was that you could set work in progress limits and they'd work like magic. And then I saw this tweet: the working column had a limit of 2, we have 3 items in it. I raised the limit to 3, there are now 4 items in it. So we do need, in this wrangling cats business, we can't just rely on numbers or limits. We need to be able to produce an effective conversation when we see things that are different from the belief system that we've got. Okay, so I want to talk now, having failed at this investment bank to a degree. I was unhappy. I think I was too hard on myself. There were many things I did well, but I felt that I'd acted ineffectively at times. Understood that humans have this potential to act like that, both in me and others. So how could I start acting more effectively? So one of the things that I've used is this idea of showing people rather than just telling them, that we have a propensity to tell people things. You should do Agile. We should do it this way. Let me tell you the truth, as one of the talks highlighted yesterday. But what can be more effective is showing people, and in my mind, sharing the information that you see, saying what you think it means, and then collaborating together to design ways forward. Because the thing is, it's not just like that whip limit showed, it's not enough just to have a number in order to drive change. Otherwise, scales would lead to weight loss. It would be as simple as just weighing yourself, and if you were too much, then you should be less. But we know that humans are quite complicated around these things. So the idea is to show publicly testable information. And so I want to switch now in my journey from that investment bank through some coaching gigs to the work that I did with BBC Worldwide. And one of the things there was they had a group called Lonely Planet at the time, and they did a lunchtime talk. They were rewriting their e-commerce site, and they'd been to a conference where they'd come up with this graph, or someone had presented it, that conversion rate falls off by how slow the page is to load. So the slower the page, the less people that bought stuff. And then they were building a new version of the Lonely Planet website, and they wanted to test this idea, and they told their product manager, hey, we should worry about how fast the page load times are, but they weren't convinced. They had other features that they wanted to do. So what they did, I thought, brilliantly, was negotiate with the product manager. They had an old version of the site, shown here in yellow, and then they built the new version. They diverted some traffic to the new version. And then they tried different experiments in here, like A, B, C, D. And they said to the product manager, we'd like to make the pages faster, but our sense is you don't believe that that's important. Would you be okay if we ran an experiment where we deliberately slowed down the page on the new site to see what the effect was? And he said, sure, let's try it. Let's run that experiment. So they slowed that page down, and higher equals better performance on this graph. E was when they slowed the page down. So they put a sleep statement in there to slow the page down by half a second, which produced publicly testable information for the product manager and the team to see that page load time really did have a difference in their environment on their site. And on that basis, they were able to do more work and invest more of their time in making things faster. So I was super excited by this, and thought they'd done so well, because rather than having a stand-up fight about the right thing, that page load time was the only thing that mattered, they'd negotiated small steps to improve. And I think this is a key enabler in the product world. Rather than trying to get to the promised land in one big step to go from the bottom of the mountain to the top, instead, let's do publicly testable information, making little steps that we can negotiate together. And one of the things that really helped me was remembering my background in improvisational theater, where they have this idea that your goal should be to make good offers and to be good to work with. And this is something I think about literally every day now. How can I help the client that I'm working with? What offer can we make? Are we being good to work with too? Like, is the experience of working us effective? So I was now working at BBC Worldwide. I was building some websites to test the hypothesis that they could create some near-news websites on the international version of the site that would attract advertisers and bring in more revenue for the BBC in the UK. And we had an established site, and I wanted to start seeing if we could learn what would make the site better by doing some small things. At the time, I didn't think navigation was the right thing to worry about, but everyone was talking about it. It was their biggest concern, what's in the header? And so we decided to start there, and we asked whether we could do some experiments where we changed the navigation because they thought it was so important. Let's go test it. So what we did was, people weren't clicking on the navigation. That was the first thing that really bothered people, that they spent all this time structuring the website, but users never really cared about it. They didn't click on it. So what we decided to do was, as the page was scrolled, we'd make the navigation bar stay at the top of the screen. So if people didn't click it, God damn it, we were just going to show it to them more until they did click it. And so it wasn't necessarily what happened. Here's what happened. This is the number of clicks per 1,000 users. We did this in a control chart, so you can see the period before we did the change, then the dotted line shows when we did the change, and every day after we did the change, we saw a performance higher than we ever had before. So it definitely helped. And it sort of built the sense that we could do experiments and learn together, and it built trust between us and the editors. So then we went on to do it more. We changed the columns, we changed the headers in another site, and you could see that the number of clicks in the navigation went up as well. And so that was very good. We negotiated small steps to improve and built this ability to start changing. But one of the things I wanted to illustrate was publicly testable information, particularly in websites and product development. You can't just rely on the numbers. You need to understand what the people are doing. And we had an interesting scenario that I wanted to share with you now that showed that, where we were trying to get more people to watch video because the idea was that there was more advertising money in video sponsorship than text. So we wanted to get videos. People were going to these video pages, but they just weren't watching them. I forgot to look at this. This was actually a headline. I didn't set the editorial, so I haven't come here to be, it's not my favorite headline. But this page was actually a video page, and we could see from the analytics that lots of people went to that page, but nobody watched the videos. And so using this principle of publicly testable information, what I decided to do was to use Amazon Mechanical Turk to do a remote usability test. So Amazon Mechanical Turk is something where you can set up a job, and this is the job that I used. I paid someone a small amount of money to go to a screencast tool, start recording their screen, go to the site, and then do some things. And I wanted to show you what I showed the editors and others to understand why we were getting all these people coming to a video page, but not actually watching the video.
Oh, I'm looking at the BBC Future stuff. Oh, wow, that's cool. Look at the airplane. I think that was the unmanned probe. Vintage robots. Interesting. Knew that was coming. Yes, yes. Aging minds. Very cool stuff. World of 3D. Now that's definitely something I want to check out soon. Hell yeah.
I love that he says, yeah, yeah. We spent 6 months on that footer. He just gave it a yeah, yeah. So sorry, this is now where he's searching for a video. But one of the things that was interesting while he's reading this is just that we were in the UK making this, and we were thinking it was the BBC for us English people that spoke English. And it was amazing just to hear that most of our audience was American. They didn't sound like us. It was a very useful thing just to get the editors to sit and watch this video. Here he is clicking on a video page.
Aging minds.
And did anyone see
No.
it? Did
Antarctica engine of ocean life.
Sorry, I've lost my pointer.
Where's the video? Play.
I just turned the volume off. Sorry, I've got the Macintosh spinning wheel of death. So did anyone see what happened there? It happened really quickly. What happened was he clicked on something where he saw a video, but as soon as he went to the page, wow. So glad I'm not on Windows. Give me 1 second. Recover my work, go for it. So what he did was click on a page where he saw a video thing, but then the top of the page, he saw the page, and then he scrolled almost instantly because there was nothing that showed a video was there, which is really hard for us to understand because we always developed on local sites with good internet connections, and the site was always there. So this was really useful publicly testable information. It showed that people were going to the page, but we didn't make it obvious that there was a video there because it was too slow loading. And So what we did from that point was basically we couldn't make the page load faster in that instance. That wasn't possible initially. So what we had to do was just put in place a placeholder. Let's hope this works. I'll just show you, this is a different subject. After we'd done the change, we ran the same test again. This guy's looking for a video. He clicks on a video, but this time, importantly, you can see a big black rectangle. And that was enough, and you can see he waits for that to load. So I just wanted to show you how publicly testable information is hugely important. When you're dealing with things, not just to look at the numbers, but to try and understand the human behavior underneath it, and how we did it in this case, and that helped us find out what was going wrong and what could do better. And just the teams I work with now in government in the UK, through my consultancy, we have user researchers on the team, and we do this every fortnight with participants in the office, and we've even worked at how to help the rest of the team understand what they should look at when they're doing the user research so that it can be a team sport rather than just an individual. Okay, so the next thing we learned was to try and make progress with imperfect tools. So the basis for this was, I don't know if anyone knows the supermarket chain in the UK, Tesco's. They delivered this Tesco club card system, which was one of the earliest sort of analytics-driven club card systems in the UK. But what I loved about them was that when they started, they didn't have enough capacity in their networks or their register systems to look at every item that everybody bought in their basket. But what they did have was an ability to detect certain items that might trigger fraud, where they could notify a security guard at the store to come in and find them. So rather than looking at the whole basket to try and understand what type of customer you were, they reused the fraud detection system to indicate certain things in your basket, like if you bought champagne, you might be a high net worth individual, whereas if you bought value brand margarine, you might be a low value, I don't know what they call it, some non-derogatory term for people that don't spend much. And they did this, and that was enough to help them understand that this concept would work, and then they could do more. And I was hugely inspired by this idea of making progress with imperfect tools. But one of the things that really makes me laugh about this, though, is that we come back to that sense of ego and identity, that sometimes if our sense of identity is doing a certain technical thing, then making progress with imperfect tools can generate embarrassment or threat. So one of the stories that I liked was Amazon. We all know this, they've been doing this for ages. Customers who bought this item also bought that item. That was fantastic, this correlation. They had this idea, what about if we looked at what people started searching for and tried to understand what they bought? Maybe we could offer them suggestions there, and that might drive up sales as well. And so they did this, and they rolled it out for an experiment, but the problem was that it meant that if people started searching for one thing but bought something else, the search would no longer be a text-based search. And the PhDs in text search actually resisted this idea because they said, this will make us look stupid. We've done all this work to understand how to do a text search. Panasonic TV isn't even in. Sony, you can see here they're suggesting Sony TVs, even though you started searching with Panasonic. It doesn't match. It's not part of the text search, and we find this a bit threatening and embarrassing. And so I think it's important to have skills that can work with humans, overcoming this embarrassment and threat, even when it might impact technical pride. Like I work with software developers all the time that keep saying a thing is a hack. I sort of say, can we do something quickly? And they're like, that's a hack. And my sense is that what's happening here sometimes is the sense that it offends their sense of technical pride. And I understand that. And the challenge from a product management point of view is we don't have enough money and time to do all the things we'd like to do. We're looking all the time to try and find things that deliver more of the purpose. We can't afford to do everything. So is there a way that we could do something that was small but not necessarily hack? So trying to unpack what hack means. So at the BBC Worldwide, one of the things was I wanted to do A/B testing to see if we could learn faster what we needed to do to get and keep customers, achieve our purpose. And I wanted to use A/B testing, but the problem is they'd spent 2 years talking about an enterprise license for a tool that everyone could use. And I was saying, well, could we do something? Could we make an offer to do something smaller? And I went to the editors and I made an offer expecting that they'd say no to this. So rather than not talking about it, because I was frightened they'd say no to it, I decided to make them an offer. So I said, look, what we can do is we could run an experiment on one part of the page, but we couldn't change it once we'd started it, and it might be there over Christmas because there's a change freeze, and you couldn't edit it. I think this is a very poor offer that I'm making, but I'm making it nevertheless, and they said, we'd love it. We'd love it. So it just shows that it's worth making offers, not even ones you don't think are good offers, giving people the choice. And what we decided to do was rather than wait for an enterprise A/B testing tool, we would instead use the hour of the day and divide it by 2. And when there was a remainder, show A. When it was even, show B. And it was amazing how much pushback this got because it offended people's sense of what the right thing to do was. But we did back testing and showed that it was always effective at showing a change that was of a decent size. So we were able to do that and experiment on pages, and we learned things really fast. And one of the key things was it started to challenge the way we were looking at the page. So these were the pages that we'd written originally. Then we did the test where we put something up and switched it from A to B, and we could see that the page views per visit increased as a result of this thing. And it was an enormous, the day we made the change, things changed versus what they'd been previously. So that was pretty amazing. So one of the key things was building psychological safety to help encourage people to challenge their assumptions around what we were doing. So this is one of my favorite examples with online websites. This I don't know if anyone recognizes this. This is the Daily Mail homepage. And back in the day, there used to be a theory that users don't scroll. That was the assumption. Users do not scroll. And just to put this in perspective, that is the height of an average person. And that is the height of the Daily Mail homepage, which has become one of the dominant sort of media sites. It broke the rules. What I like about this is even Jakob Nielsen, who's a usability expert, I think my sense is this is a slightly defensive reaction for him. He's saying, this site breaks all so-called usability rules. It's user-friendly for normal people, not for internet fanatics. But regardless, it just showed that we needed to challenge assumptions. So where we were at BBC was using these A/B tests to drive things that created excellent results. And then I started talking to the editors about this idea, what's our current assumption about the site? What does the site reflect? And so the de facto policy, if you like, that drove the site was, it's okay to assume users will care as much about the site navigation and content as we do. Like all those tests we did with the nav bar. Although we increased the number of clicks, it still didn't really make a difference overall. And it helped us reflect that maybe we cared more about the design of the site than our users did because we had to build it. And so then we said, well, what would be a more effective assumption or belief based on what we've learned? And so we came up with this, that users aren't hunting for specific content as much as they're foraging for interesting things right in front of them now. And that drove a whole series of experiments with photos and pictures and headlines and chunking things up. Because originally, I'll go back a bit, you can see the page when we started was very blank. It was mostly focused on text. It assumed that people read and spend time reading. They used to commission 5,000-word articles because they come from print. And you saw in that video, I think, if you just reflect back on how long that guy spent reading, like he spent no time reading. He spent no time. So we kept saying, why are we doing all this text-heavy stuff instead of driving photos? And could we run some A/B tests that would help us understand what might do better? And so then we did. And so this is what the site ended up like. So you can see, here's how it was before. Content light, mainly focused on text, a few photos. And then here, we've put a lot more photos in, a lot more options of our best work. Because I was saying to people that for a user to find interesting content, because this wasn't timely news, this was off news, so it was more of a magazine style. So we were able to run experiments on nearly every part of this page and drive performance better and better. And again, it came from that simple start where we negotiated small steps, we used imperfect tools, and we learned from things, and then made it safe to start talking about assumptions and changing our assumptions. So the final tip is to give people the tools to help them measure, are they achieving their purpose? So in that BBC context, it was, are we getting and keeping customers? Are more coming? Are they staying longer? What's our retention? And one of the things that the experiment showed was that the driving assumption was we should publish content based on the time of day, and every sort of X hours we should switch the content because people would be bored of it. But when we went and looked at what people were actually doing, this is a graph of clicks per headline per 1,000 hourly visitors. So just normalizing the number of people that came across the day. And what you can see here that's really interesting is that some stories, like this one in red, oh, it's like Raiders of the Lost Ark. This one in red here was at the top, and then they switched it for the blue story, and then they switched it back to the red story. And you can see that the levels of engagement from an audience were the same. And I remember feeling like a religious deity, because I went to the editors and said, if you put this story back up, I reckon you'll get more clicks. And we did. And it was a great trick. And actually, we did test it, and it's amazing how hard it is to be given permission to test. We tested leaving something up there for a long time, and the decay rate was far lower than we would have predicted. Stories kept getting clicks even hours and 12 hours afterwards. And so that started to change people's mindset around what the work was. And one example of this was an editor said to me, I'm no longer talking to people about writing the article, I'm talking to them about what their headline is and what the photo is that we can use to advertise it. Because unless we engage people at that level, it doesn't matter how good the story is, we're just not getting the interaction that we want. It's not achieving our purpose of getting and keeping customers. So this was done by me using Excel, but it proved the point that they could change their publishing time schedule and leave content that was working well up for longer than they'd previously expected. They didn't have to keep changing things around. Then happily, we gave them a tool. This is a product called Chartbeat. Apologies, it's been a little while since I've looked at this world. I don't know if there are better things, but it measures how long users are engaged on the page reading. So it checks whether the users move their mouse in the last sort of 15 to 20 seconds. This helps them understand whether someone is engaged or not, which I think is a pretty good measure that relates to the purpose. Just going back to that model at the start, the purpose, the measures, and the method. If we look at the measures here, it's engaged time. We want to maximize that because if we maximize engaged time, it's much more likely that we'll get and keep customers, which is our chief purpose. So they gave this to all the editors, and then the editors were using this to work out what to promote in which parts of the site, and they were doing it based on this engagement data rather than the clock, which they'd used previously. So I thought this was an excellent example about how all the work we'd done had led people to understand how they could challenge assumptions and change their assumptions in order to better achieve their purpose. So that completes my talk. I wanted to just rattle back through it. The 7 tips: start with purpose. Don't focus on your method. You're not here to do Agile, Kanban, or even be digital. It needs to relate to a purpose for the business, get and keep customers, or a purpose that works in your environment. The biggest thing you can do, I think, is that culture starts with your own behavior. Because before I started looking at how I was talking to people and interacting with people, I spent a long time reading about how maybe they were bad people, maybe they were Republicans or Democrats or introverts or extroverts. Maybe it was them, instead of understanding that I had the biggest ability to make a change. But it does involve overcoming your sense of grief, potentially, that you might not be as good as you'd like to think you are, and humility in accepting that we can act very differently than we say we act. And to improve on that, you really need to ask for help from others. Then the key thing is get publicly testable information. Don't just tell people that they should do something. And ideally, negotiate a small step to try something to see whether things could improve, rather than bashing them over the head, saying they should follow your orders. Make progress with imperfect tools. Don't wait till you've got the enterprise A/B testing system. And then create an environment where it's safe to challenge assumptions. And if you can, give people the tools that they can use to measure whether they're achieving the purpose, rather than keeping that as something only for senior executives. So if you liked any of that, feel free to contact me. There are some books that I'd suggest reading that I found very, very helpful. And any questions if we have time.